The August 26th meeting of the Legislative Inspector General Advisory Commission. I've been assigned and designated by Majority Leader Aaron Murphy as required under Minnesota law, Chapter 29, to convene the first meeting of the commission. I just want to say, my name is Heather Gustafson. I'm a state senator for SD 36, which is primarily Vadnais Heights, White Bear Lake, and the Lino Lakes area. And I just want to thank everybody for being here today and welcome. In a moment, I'm going to ask members and staff to introduce themselves, but first I just wanted to say a few brief words because this is a historic moment for Minnesota. When we passed the bill to establish an independent office of Inspector General, our state took a very serious step forward, creating an office to detect and investigate fraud and safeguard the integrity of the programs that Minnesotans rely on. This office has teeth, it has subpoena power, investigative authority, and real consequences for fraud and misuse of public funds. And this commission carries the weight of that commitment. Our job over the next several months is to identify and recommend a candidate worthy of this office's independence and responsibility. That candidate will set the tone for this office for years to come, how rigorously it investigates, how fairly it treats those it oversees, and how much public trust it earns. We have a statutory deadline of January 1st to make our recommendation, and the governor must appoint by February 1st. Minnesota has not had an office like this before. How we build it and who we choose to lead it will define what accountability looks like in this state for generations. Thank you again for everyone for being here. And now let's get to work, and we can start with introductions. Should we start with, let's start with our staff first and just go around the table. Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members. I'm Colby Sullivan with the Nonpartisan House Research Department.
Madam Chair and members, my name is Stephanie James. I'm Senate Counsel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Eric Putnam. I'm the State Senator from the Greater St. Cloud area. I do want to just take a brief moment to thank you, Madam Chair, and Senator Kroon in particular for your bipartisan work on this and realizing that while we're making some decisions today, it's a product of a lot of work that's gone on for the past couple of years.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Michael Kroon, State Senator, District 32, Blaine, Ham Lake, Columbus, and Lexington. Well, we finally got here. The Office of Inspector General is happening. We're going to get this off the ground, and it's going to make a big difference in Minnesota. It's a culture shift in Minnesota, and I'm happy to have been a part of it. I look forward to our work here in this group, making sure that we do our part to implement the intent of what we spent 2 years crafting and pushing to get over the finish line and passed into law. So I'd like to thank the members and look forward to working with you.
Madam Chair, State Senator Mark Cran represents Chisago and Isani counties, about 40 miles north of St. Paul, Minneapolis. And also excited, as you know, and many may not know, except for the few in the room here, that we met every single week of 2025, every single Tuesday at 5 o'clock. And a couple hours, Republican, Democrat, partisan staff, nonpartisan staff, and everybody worked extraordinarily hard. It's a great foundation. I think in addition to a variety of us met every Friday with a variety of OIGs across the country and the associations to ensure that we balance the needs of the constitutionality and the ability to sustain the office regardless of who the executive is. And so I think we did a great job at balancing that. It's not the end-all be-all solution to solve and cure for all today's problems. At the end of the day, it's a great solution to stop the things that have been systemic for us in the waste and utilization, both internally from state government and externally. It'll be a great fun. I'm honored that our caucus chose us to be a part of this, and so we will work extraordinarily hard to make sure this is create foundation and then build upon it, that we are the oversight for all state agencies. And then ultimately, so many things we do carry down to the counties who deliver many of our services. And so glad to be a part of it. And thank you, everyone.
Hi, I'm Sally Olson. I'm a commission administrator with the Legislative Coordinating Commission and helping to provide admin support to the commission.
I'm State Representative Ginny Cleavorn. I represent the communities of Plymouth and Medicine Lake in the northwest suburbs, and I co-chair state government with my colleague, Jim Nash.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, Representative Jim Nash, pleased to be here today. Pleased for the bipartisan work that has been on full display for this whole effort. I'm most excited because what I hear from people is that they are tired of the fraud. And if you'll indulge me, Madam Chair, this is where all the fraud money comes from for people around the state of Minnesota. It comes from one of these, and it is time that we put this now in motion, do an excellent job, make sure we are achieving bipartisanship so that people who have seen the money evaporating from their wallets know that state government is actually looking critically and is going to shut down the fraud that we have been so plagued by. So I'm pleased to be here.
Chair Gustafson, members, I'm Matt Norris. I have the privilege of representing the communities of Blaine and Lexington in the Minnesota House of Representatives, and it's exciting to be here today. It's been great to work with you, Chair Gustafson, Senator Kroon, Representative Anderson, and a number of folks around the table in a real bipartisan process to get us to this point today. I think the quality of our work really started to shine for me when I looked at the position description and saw the things that this office is going to be tasked with. And as you page through it, you really see that, yes, this is the sort of thing that we need here in Minnesota to restore that confidence in the accountability of our taxpayer dollars. And so I'm excited to be embarking on this next stage of the journey with all of you.
Good morning, everybody. Representative Tom Sexton. I represent 19B, which is Medford, Owatonna, Waseca area. I also have in the background 26 years of service in the Air Force, where I retired as a full colonel. And the idea of an inspector general is deeply embedded within the military, each service as well as jointly. So I'm looking forward to helping to evolve what we do with the inspector general. And more than anything else, when you come into the culture of the military, you learn quickly that anybody can report anything to the Inspector General and realize that there are no repercussions because we want a better military to serve all of us in our nation. So we need to bring that to Minnesota. Thank you.
Good morning, members. I'm Michelle Urich. I'm the director of the Legislative Coordinating Commission, which is a nonpartisan joint office here at the legislature. And our office is charged with providing administrative support to the commission. We're looking forward to working with all of you.
Good morning. My name is Rosie Lackner. I am the HR Director with the Legislative Coordinating Commission.
Thank you, everybody. We're going to hear now an overview of the commission responsibilities from Ms. Urich.
Good morning. For the record, Michelle Urich with the Legislative Coordinating Commission. I'm going to be presenting several pieces of information to you today. The first is an overview of the commission's responsibilities. Within your packet, you'll find a memo from me that is titled Commission/Organizational Overview. The commission is established and its responsibilities were outlined in Chapter 92, Article 1, Sections 15 and 18. The commission is comprised of 8 members, 4 members each from the House and the Senate, with 2 members representing each caucus within those bodies. The members serve at the pleasure of the appointing authority and until a replacement is appointed. There is no term limit for the members of the commission. For today's meeting, the first meeting of the commission, as Senator Gustafson mentioned, the Senate Majority Leader was required to identify an individual to convene the meeting. Also during today's meeting, the commission is to elect a chair from among its Senate members. In January of next year, the commission is to elect a chair from among the House members, and the chair is scheduled to alternate between the House and the Senate every 2 years. The commission's primary responsibility is to make recommendations for the appointment of the Inspector General to the governor. For this appointment to the position, the commission's recommendations must be made by January 1st, 2027. The commission is also required to hold at least 1 hearing and provide recommendations to the chairs and ranking members of the committees with jurisdiction over commerce and public safety as to whether the financial crimes and fraud section of the Department of Public Safety should be merged merged with the Office of the Inspector General. This recommendation must also be made by January 1st, 2027. In addition to the responsibilities for this year, the Commission on an ongoing basis may conduct hearings to oversee and review the work of the Inspector General, and is also responsible for conducting a competitive process to make recommendations for the Inspector General position in the event there is a vacancy, the governor-appointed candidate is not confirmed by the Senate, or every 5 years, which is the term of the Inspector General appointment. The third page of the memo outlines the criteria by which the commission must select candidates, the qualifications a candidate must hold, and the requirements for candidates to disclose political and partisan activities. To be recommended by the commission, a candidate must receive an affirmative vote of at least 5 members. The commission is also subject to the legislature's open meeting requirements, and members of the commission may receive per diem and expense reimbursement in accordance with the policies of their bodies. That concludes my overview of the responsibilities of the commission. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Members, any questions? And I will just say, too, going forward, we're going to hear several different presentations of the setup of this office. People should feel free to ask direct questions. There is a part on the agenda, though, on Section 8, I believe, where we can go into more further discussion or debate. But please, at any moment, feel free to raise your hand and ask questions. All right, seeing none, thank you, Ms. Urich. And we will move on to the third item of the agenda, chair election. So our first order of formal business is to elect a chair for the commission per Chapter 29. The chair must be from among the Senate members. Call for nominations of a Senate member to serve as chair. And if there is only one nomination, we can proceed with a voice vote. So any nominations for chair?
Madam Chair,
Senator Curran.
I would like to nominate Senator Heather Gustafson as chair.
All right, thank you. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Recommendation accepted. Thank you very much. And now, going forward, I think just to keep in tradition of similar offices that we have here at the legislature and to continue in our bipartisan spirit, I think it would be wise of us to elect a vice chair to serve, just not only for efficiency purposes, but also to show a unity of leadership staff. I think it would be appropriate to nominate someone from the House. I would like to nominate Representative Jim Nash to be vice chair. Any discussion? Representative Cleavorn.
Thank you very much. And I appreciate the nomination of my colleague, Jim Nash. I do. I also think that it's important that it be recognized that Matt Norris was your colleague and the co-author in the House. So I would also put into nomination Matt Norris's name.
All right. Thank you, Representative Cleavorn. Anybody else? Okay. I'm no bigger fan at this table of Representative Matt Norris than myself, and I think we all have to recognize the extraordinary work that Representative Norris did on this bill. He was the chief author in the House. He was instrumental in writing the bill and pushing it forward. I think he did an excellent job, and my only reservation would just be that we really do want to keep this bipartisan, as we have been so good about doing since the beginning of the bill and its writing. So I'll stick with since I've already put it out there, I'll stick with my recommendation, but we will take it to a vote if there's any other discussion. All right, so roll call. Yes, thank you.
Senator Gustafson?
Just to be clear, we're going with my initial motion or recommendation?
Just say the name.
Or you could say the name.
Got it. Okay, sorry. Nash.
Senator Curran?
Nash.
Senator Cruen?
Nash.
Senator Putnam?
Nash.
Representative Cleavorn?
Norris.
Representative Nash?
Nash.
Representative Norris?
Nash.
Representative Sexton.
Nash.
7 Nash, 1 Norris.
There are 7 Nash and 1 Norris, so Vice Chair would be Representative Jim Nash. All right, we are now on to number 4 of our agenda, the Department of Administration overview of OIG Implementation Office and proposed position description. I'd like to welcome to the table Ms. Ann Freeman. Please state your name for the record and begin when ready.
All right, good morning. For the record, my name is Ann Feynman. Good morning, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, and Commission members. I'm Ann Feynman. I am the Human Resources Director at the Department of Administration. My office provides HR support to the Department of Administration, along with 46 other small agencies, boards, and councils under what we call the SMART program, or the Small Agency Resource Team. I'm honored to be a part of the Office of Inspector General Implementation Team, and I'm here today to talk with you and ask for your guidance, your input, your recommendations into the draft materials provided to you today, along with your decision on the process for which we'll use to hire the next Inspector General. So just a couple of items on the agenda for my presentation include a brief overview of our OIG implementation team, both the purpose and our work streams, and an overview of the proposed draft Inspector General position description. The OIG implementation team, under Session Law Chapter 92 or Minnesota State Statute 15E.10, it gave admin the authority to help establish and set up the Office of the Inspector General. The OIG implementation team exists to manage and support the operational establishment of this office during its first 12 to 18 months. And the team aims to prepare and support the set of the initial structure and infrastructure, resources, and solutions to help make the launch of this office successful. You'll see on this slide our implementation team. This includes our implementation lead, along with project support. That includes our project manager, as well as our project coordinator, as well as several different work streams to help make this project successful. These specific work streams include work with human resources, which I'm happy to be the lead on that specific work stream, finance, legal, intergovernmental relations, and specifically related to any transition of staff, including the Minnesota Department of Education OIG transfer to this office, communications and change management, IT and operations. Operations include space planning as well. And then finally, research and resource development. And of course, we'd be happy in further discussions to provide more information on our implementation work. In your packets, you have several draft items related to this meeting today. First is the position description. You also have a draft job posting, along with a proposed hiring process and timeline that Ms. Urick will provide additional information on, and our marketing and outreach plan. The IG position description was initially drafted by the Minnesota Management and Budgets classification team with input from stakeholders, and the PD is mainly based on the duties outlined in the statute. The first part of the position description, Part A, covers the position purpose. It also covers who this position reports to, along with who it supervises, as well as the budget and the clientele. The position purpose is to establish and lead this office as an independent oversight entity within the executive branch in compliance with statutory deadlines, professional standards, and legislatively mandated reporting requirements. It's responsible for safeguarding the integrity, accountability, and transparency in the operations of state executive branch agencies and programs. It establishes and enforces statewide standards for fraud prevention and investigative processes. It conducts and coordinates inspections and program integrity investigations across agencies. And then finally, it ensures that all findings, actions, and operations are documented through robust reporting systems. The IG will report to the governor. It will supervise the Deputy Inspector General along with additional Office of Inspector General staff. We estimate approximately 44 full-time staff, at least in this initial establishment. The clientele will, of course, include the governor, executive branch agencies and leadership, as well as agency inspector generals, law enforcement, prosecutorial partners, legislative oversight bodies, including closely working with the Office of the Legislative Auditor, private entities, contractors, service providers, internal OIG staff, and contracted external reviewers, and of course, members of the public. The budget will include a little over $2 million in fiscal year 27 that this position will oversee, as well as just over $6.5 million in the base budget in fiscal years 28 and 29. The next part of the position description lays out the principal responsibilities. This is in Part B of that position description. These principal responsibilities include directing the operations, personnel, and administrative systems of the OIG, develop and enforce statewide standards for agency inspector general operations, conduct independent inspections, evaluations, and investigations of state programs, local governments, and private recipients of state funds to detect fraud, direct the development and strategic use of statewide data, analytics, and intelligence capabilities to strengthen fraud prevention, detection, investigation, and enforcement, issue referrals, fraud alerts, and exclusion list determinations, maintain statewide fraud reporting and complaint tracking systems, and provide independent legislative and policy recommendations to strengthen statewide program integrity. You'll see in the position descriptions principal responsibilities, percentages that we roughly estimate that this position will spend in doing or overseeing at least each of these items. And then finally, we move to Part C. Part C of that position description includes the knowledge, skills, and abilities needed for this position. It talks about the nature and scope of this position, the relationships that this position will engage with, and the level of problem solving this position will have, along with the level of authority and independence this position will have under the Freedom to Act section. This slide highlights the knowledge, skills, and abilities, specifically those statutory minimum qualifications that are required for this position. This position will need to hold a bachelor's or higher degree in criminal justice, public administration, law, or related field, have at least 10 years of professional experience in auditing, investigations, law enforcement, program integrity, or related discipline, possess a professional certification in the Association of Inspector Generals, and then demonstrate commitment to public service integrity and provide public disclosure of prior professional opinions or actions that may influence the approach to this role. So with that, I will turn it back over to you to see if there are any additional questions.
Thank you, Ms. Feynman. Any questions from members? Representative Cleburne?
Thank you very much. One of the pieces that I find a little bit difficult in the Section C is this demonstration of commitment. Will you be able to provide to the committee some examples of what that demonstration of commitment? I know you've done it at a very high level, but I think that's the piece that is more subjective and objective. So I don't know. How does that work?
Ms. Feynman?
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, and under that light as well, I think we will lean back as we talk about not only the position that takes the leadership role, but the operational policies for everybody that operates within that agency as well. And so we do go through great lengths, right, to make sure that partisanship or bipartisanship is non-existent, and it goes into practices in the OLA where we don't allow them to run for office. Those types of things, or to be able to overtly identify in their private life, right, in order to serve in the capacity. And I think we need to mirror those types of hiring and operational policies from the agency head all the way through the staff and operations.
Representative Cleburne?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just asking for concrete kinds of examples. I don't disagree with the neutrality of the office. I don't disagree with the items that you're stating. I'm just asking, how do we get to the most neutral position possible in doing that commitment to public service.
And I think we can probably hear too from Ms. Feynman, who can maybe answer your question directly.
Thank you. Thank you, Representative Cleavorn, for the question. I would hate to speculate on specific examples here at this table necessarily. I think it's going to obviously depend on the candidate, but we are really looking for accountability and transparency in terms of identifying any potential conflicts of interest that may impact the judgment of this individual. I think we can all agree that Minnesotans really need to be able to trust the individual in this particular position. And so doing that nonpartisan check with the Legislative Coordinating Commission and making sure that we are identifying any potential conflicts of interest so that that person is coming to the table, essentially having that transparent, right, accountability. And then I think for all of you to essentially take a look and assess whether any of those potential conflicts or viewpoints, right, might get in the way of that person's judgment in this role.
Follow-up, Representative Cleavorn?
Well, I just want to say thank you, because it is that public trust that we're trying to get to. And so your answer was spot on. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Any other questions, members? All right, seeing none, thank you very much. We will move to Compensation Council Salary Determination, and welcome back to the table, Ms. Urich.
Members, the Compensation Council under Minnesota Statute 15A.082 was charged with setting the starting salary for the Inspector General position. This council also sets the salary of other executive branch agency heads. They met over the summer and considered several pieces of information. They compared the work of the Inspector General to other similar positions and considered recommendations from Minnesota Management and Budget, who had conducted a Hayes study on the position description that you have before you today. The Compensation Council's final determination was to set the salary at $198,214, $214, which was the result of the Hayes study rating on the position. The next Compensation Council will meet again in February of next year, and at that time, they can make a determination about whether or not there are any changes to the salary for the position, and their determination would go into effect on July 1st of next year.
Members, any questions? Senator Kroon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On the compensation, is there room for flexibility in this process depending on who is actually appointed or who's under consideration in any event? It sounds like the timeline may not work for that, but as with a lot of jobs, there's maybe a range depending, and then you wait and see if the applicants, how much experience they have and that sort of thing. You could be at the top of the range or at the bottom of the range or in the middle of the range. Is there any flexibility in this process for that approach?
Ms. Urich?
Madam Chair and Senator Curran, the authorizing legislation for the Inspector General set the salary for the Inspector General similar to other agency head salaries, which is a set amount. It is not a range. So it's a set amount as determined by the Compensation Council.
Any other questions, members? Oh, Senator Kroon? Oh, all right. Thank you very much. Moving on to the sixth item, presentation on recruitment, screening, and hiring processes. This is where I think it'll probably have a little bit more detail of what it looks like to actually go through the screening process, to the hiring process, to having them here before our commission. So feel free to ask questions at any time, members. And again, we can debate or deliberate a little bit more when we get further down in the agenda. Ms. Urich.
Madam Chair and members, the Legislative Coordinating Commission worked in consultation with nonpartisan House and Senate staff, as well as the Department of Administration, to bring forward a proposed process for your consideration today. The process we're bringing forward to you is a hybrid of both legislative and executive branch director level and agency head hiring processes, considering that this position is ultimately an executive branch position. I'll be presenting an overview of some current hiring processes. One is the legislative auditor hiring process, and the other is the LCC process to appoint executive directors of the executive branch councils that are under the authority of the LCC. Ann Feeman will also talk a bit about the process of hiring agency heads, and then we will provide an overview of the recommended process for the Inspector General position. In your packets, you have 3 documents that I'll be speaking to. The first is a memo to the members of the Legislative Audit Commission, providing an overview of the legislative auditor appointment process when it was last vacant in 2021. The legislative auditor is appointed to a 6-year term by the Legislative Audit Commission. The process of selecting an individual to serve in that position involves the LCC posting the position and receiving applications, a nonpartisan panel of House, Senate, and LCC staff that screen the resumes for qualified candidates and conduct first-round interviews. A panel of LAC members. The Legislative Audit Commission is bicameral, bipartisan, and what they do is they identify individuals from each of the bodies and each of the caucuses to serve as a second-round interview process of candidates. And part of that is protecting the privacy of the candidates who have applied for the position. The panel of LAC members then makes a recommendation of any candidates to advance to the full Legislative Audit Commission for consideration of appointment. Prior to that advancement, a nonpartisan review is conducted, a background study is conducted, and reference checks are also conducted before appointment of the Legislative Audit Commission. So before I move on to the next process, I'll pause and see if you have any questions about the process of appointment of the legislative auditor.
Thank you. Members, any questions? Senator Kroon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In that process with the legislative auditor, once it goes from kind of the initial interviews to the public one, is there a set number of people in that process, or is it more flexible in terms of how many candidates advance to that next round?
Ms. Urick.
Chair Gustafson and Senator Kern, there isn't a set number, so the Legislative Audit Subcommittee makes the determination. In 2021, they determined that there was 1 candidate to advance to the public meeting of the Legislative Audit Commission.
Senator Kroon. Anybody else, members? All right. Thank you.
The next process that I'll speak to is the Legislative Coordinating Commission appointment process for executive branch employees who serve as executive director of, there are 4 councils that the LCC has appointment authority for. The most recent vacancy occurred with the Minnesota Council of Latino Affairs, and a copy of the memo outlining that process is also included in your packets. This process involved the LCC working in consultation with the council and the Department of Administration for the following steps. The Department of Administration, having it be an executive branch position, posted the position and received applications. They then provided all applications to the Legislative Coordinating Commission, and a panel of nonpartisan LCC, House, and Senate staff, as well as individuals that were representing the council, reviewed the resumes and identified individuals to invite to a first-round interview. The first-round interview was also conducted by the same panel of individuals, but prior to the interviews taking place, the Department of Administration and the Legislative Coordinating Commission HR directors review the candidates that had been identified to ensure that they met the minimum qualifications for the position. The LCC conducted a partisan review and reference check on finalists. The finalists met in a meet and greet with the full council, and then leadership staff representing the 4 caucuses at the Minnesota legislature interviewed finalists and made a recommendation for appointment, and a subcommittee of the Legislative Coordinating Commission made the final appointment of the executive director for that position. Are there any questions that I can answer?
Members, any questions? All right. Next. Thank you.
Okay.
Ms. Fahan.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. So I'm here to just talk briefly about the Department of Administration's internal hiring process related to executive level positions. I'm not here to discuss how the governor's process works related to commissioners, but specifically our executive level positions, both within Department of Admin and in other boards, smaller agencies and councils. When we hire for these executive level positions, our process typically includes a similar process to our regular competitive process. We develop and review the position description for accuracy. We post the job for approximately 30 days or more, depending on how hard it might be to recruit for that particular position. We'll review resumes for those minimum qualifications, often along the side of the hiring authority. We'll determine the interview pool, and then we'll interview with a panel of stakeholders. Generally, the first panel is often different from the second panel when it proceeds to the second round interview. What those finalists will be identified to go to that second round interview. And then generally we'll work with that hiring authority. We'll do reference checks and background checks through the department of our Human Resources office in the department. And then we'll make an offer to the finalist of that position. Any questions about that process?
Representative Nash.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a question. I was talking with Representative Norris just here. Do we feel that 30 days is a sufficient window to receive applications? I've hired hundreds of people, and there have been times that we leave jobs open longer than 30 days. And I don't necessarily want to inhibit a 30-day window, but I also don't want it to be the only expressed measurement of time if we feel like we need to expand the number of people who we're getting this in front of. And the follow-up question to that, Madam Chair, is are we simply posting this, or will there be recruiters that get involved as well? I just wondered, because I talked to Representative Norris, and I don't believe the statute expresses how people will be recruited or made aware of the job being posted. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative Nash. I don't want to get ahead of your answer, but I think you've got probably a recruitment plan in here too that we're going to discuss. But if you want to answer his question about the 30 days, I think that's valid. We are on a tight timetable, but you could say more. And I'm sorry, I keep getting your name wrong, Ms. Feynman.
Thank you, Chair Gustafson. So initially in the timeline, you'll see that we allowed for 30 days with some play, I would think, of another week or two to give us some extra time. Because of the timeline, Representative Nash, with the recommendation having to go to the governor by January 1st, it's a very tight timeline. So we are saying let's post initially for 30 days and see how many candidates we get who meet those qualifications. And if we do need to extend it a little bit, we can. And yes, there is also an outreach plan that is located within your packet, and we do plan to work with our statewide recruiters as well.
Follow-ups, members? Representative Sexton?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Question on the professional certification from the Association of Inspector Generals. I noticed visiting their website, that's only a 5-day course for both Certified Inspector General, Certified Inspector General Investigator. If someone doesn't currently possess that, can we still interview them? It seems like it would be fairly easy to get that before the January 1st timeline if, there was a serious candidate and had everything else. Is that some flexibility we can build in?
Ms. Feynman?
Thank you, Chair Gustafson, Representative Sexton. Because it is a statutory requirement, we will have to make sure that they possess it at the time we select them for interview, because we're required to have candidates that meet those minimum qualifications at the time of interview.
Thank you, nothing further.
Representative Norris?
Thank you, Chair Gustafson. I like the idea of initially, especially given the timeline, posting for 30 days and then kind of reassessing. I guess my question is, that reassessment process, is that solely staff-driven? Are members of this commission going to be able to be involved in making that determination of whether we have a good pool of candidates or we need to extend?
Ms. Feynman?
Chair Gustafson, Representative Norris, we would recommend that we work closely with you to determine, do we have enough candidates? Do you want to keep that timeline open a little longer?
Thank you, Ms. Feynman. I think it's part of our ongoing, before we close out today too, to see when, set the next meeting and address what that agenda might be. Any other questions on the timeline before we move to the next thing? All right. Seeing none, I believe we are on number 7, proposed recruitment, screening, recommendation, and hiring process.
Yes, Madam Chair, I'm just sharing the screen again. Okay. Next one. There we go. Thank you, Madam Chair and members. So in your packet, you have a document titled Inspector General Proposed Hiring Process, and the last questions and conversations started to look at the details of this. There are also 2 other documents that supplement this process, the recruitment overview and the draft of the position posting. As mentioned, the Department of Administration, the Legislative Coordinating Commission, and nonpartisan staff from the House and the Senate have put this process together for your consideration today. The process involves the LCC providing administrative support to the Commission by working collaboratively with nonpartisan House and Senate staff, the Department of Administration, and members of the Commission. The considerations we made when developing this process were to align a legislative and executive branch hiring process so that the Commission's process would inform the governor's ultimate appointment decision, and to protect the privacy of applicants until they are considered as finalists to be recommended by the full Commission. The process before you involves the Department of Administration posting the position and receiving the applications. All applications are then provided to the Legislative Coordinating Commission. A panel of nonpartisan LCC, House, and Senate staff, as well as designees from the Commission that represent each body and each caucus, would review the applications and identify candidates for a first-round interview. The LCC and Department of Administration Human Resource Directors would then review those candidates to confirm that they meet the minimum qualifications for the position. A panel of nonpartisan LCC, House, and Senate staff would conduct the first-round interviews and identify candidates to advance to a second-round interview. The LCC HR Director would conduct the disclosure of political affiliations and activities for candidates identified to advance to a second round. A panel of commission members, again representing each body and each caucus, would conduct second-round interviews. Both the first round and the second-round interviews would be private interviews, so the candidates' names would not be publicly revealed at that time. The commission members then that participate in that second-round interview would be identifying finalists to advance to the full commission for consideration. Prior to the advancement, the LCC and Department of Administration Human Resource Directors would conduct reference checks and background studies and report the results to the panel of commission members, who would formally then determine which candidates would advance to the full commission. And then the full commission would meet in a public meeting to recommend candidates to the governor. At this point, the identification of the finalists would become public information. We've also included in the proposed hiring process the steps and timeline for the governor to make the final appointment, and recognize that it's subject to Senate confirmation as well.
All right, members, questions? Senator Cruin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The proposal creates a sub-panel of this commission for the second round interviews, which would be private. My question is, it's a relatively small group of 8. There could be good arguments to have a sub-panel to go to 4, but I guess my question is from a legal standpoint, does it need to be a sub-panel because the second round interviews are private? Or could that theoretically, under the law, be the whole commission?
Senator Gustafson Chair Gustafson and Senator Cruin, there is no provision in the legislation that would permit the full commission to meet privately with those candidates, so it certainly could. The process could have the second round interviews be conducted by the full commission, but those would have to be conducted in a public meeting. And therefore, then all of the individuals would be known at that time.
Senator Cruin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just so I'm understanding, if we wanted to have the full body here present and participate in the second round interview, that would have to be a public meeting. Did I understand that correctly?
Chair Gustafson and Senator Cruin, yes, that's correct. It would have to be a public meeting.
And it is your the proposal in front of us, I should say, is the smaller group, and that would ideally be 2 or 4 of a subpanel that does the private interviews?
Chair Gustafson, the recommendation would be that it be a panel of 4, so that there are 2 members of the Senate from each caucus and 2 members of the House from each caucus who are participating in the second round interview and making the recommendation of candidates to advance to the full commission.
Okay.
And that is consistent with the legislative auditor process, as well as the director of the Legislative Budget Office.
Okay. Members, any other, sorry, yes, Senator Cruin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And then, so if we go with the sub-panel and have the second round interviews be private, would it be up to that sub-panel then how many names would advance to that third round?
Ms. York?
Madam Chair and Senator Cruin, yes, that's correct, unless the full commission were to instruct and indicate that they would like to see at least X number of candidates.
Senator Cruin, sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we could construct a process where the full body here could give the sub-panel some parameters to work within, and then the sub-panelists would take those parameters, go to that second round interview in private, and then use their discretion under the umbrella of those parameters to advance names to the third round interview. Is that correct?
Ms. York?
Chair Gustafson and Senator Cruin, yes, that's correct. The full commission could provide instruction to the process of things.
All right. Senator Cleburne? Or Representative, sorry.
Please. Yeah. Thank you. And this is, I know the answer, but I think because we're discussing this process for the first time for people, what happens if we advance a candidate and the Senate, because the hurdle for the Senate to confirm is very high? Could you just kind of briefly inform the public what would happen if that Senate confirmation does not go forward?
Ms. York?
Madam Chair and Representative Claiborne, if the candidate is not confirmed by the Senate, then the commission would start the process over. So the commission then would be charged with opening up a competitive process and screening candidates, and again, making recommendations to the governor. The governor would make a new appointment for consideration of Senate appointment.
Senator Cruin?
Thank you, Madam Chair. In that event, in the event that was just described, or perhaps a resignation in the middle of the 5-year term, or some other process, some other event that happens that isn't the full appointment process at the end of the 5-year term, would the process have to stay the exact same as the initial process, or would this body have the ability to truncate it or change the process?
Ms. York?
Chair Gustafson and Senator Cruin, the commission would have the authority to develop a new process.
All right. All right, thank you very much. We're now at the point of discussion. So we've absorbed all of the different ways of the hiring process, the compensation, the job duties. This is where members can discuss what they think we should do going forward. We do have some motions going forward of the proposal. We could talk about the parameters, but I leave it sort of open because here's where we have to decide what we're going to do going forward, how many more meetings we're going to need to confirm before we leave today. And so this is the place for that. Look through your packets, and if there are questions, we're ready for those now. You guys did such a great job. Just take a minute. Representative Sexton.
Madam Chair, not sure who to direct the question to. Are we going to talk about the job class particular document that was included?
Thank you, Representative Sexton. Yes, are either one of you at the table ready to talk about that, the job class?
Yes. Yes, Chair. So I guess, is there a question specific to the job class? The job class is the Inspector General.
There is.
I'm sorry, Representative Sexton.
Yes, ma'am. So as I looked at this, it seemed like it was fairly congruent with the principal responsibilities described in Part B of your slides, until I got down to the last sentence, which is paragraph 2 of the first page. When something isn't working the way it should, we step in with courage, expertise, and a commitment to fixing problems at their source. To me, that statement is incongruent with everything else in the job description because it sounds more like a coach. My recommendation to the panel would be that we just delete that and proceed.
Ms. Feynman or Ms. Urick, is there any objection to getting rid of that last statement? Does that do anything to the job class or affect the job in any way?
No, it would not. Thank you, Chair Gustafson, Representative Sexton. It will not impact the job class at all. This first particular couple of paragraphs under the work you'll do is more than just a job. It's just a way essentially for us to kind of market and get people interested in the position. I'm happy to get rid of that statement or modify it if you would like us to modify it.
Representative Cleavorn?
Thank you. And Representative Sexton, I really do appreciate you bringing the question forward. When I read that, I thought maybe that implied that we have a system that's, let's say, in operation in DHS. And we see that, or the Inspector General's office sees that it's maybe not functioning the way it could, the system could be enhanced, I'll put it that way. And this would just state that we welcome an Inspector General who's going to be looking at our overall policies and making recommendations for improvement. And we want you to do that. We don't want you to be a rubber stamp for systems that are already in place. So that's kind of how I read it. I don't have a problem with it being removed, but I also think it's really important that we empower this individual to be bold and make recommendations for improvement. But maybe you could clarify that.
Ms. Feynman?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I mean, I kind of look at it both ways, right? There is this enforcement authority and oversight authority where the IG can step in and subpoena and take, legal actions and things like that. And then hopefully, yes, there is a more proactive way to stop some of these things happening at its source. But again, I'm open to any feedback that you all have.
And I'm sorry, I just want to go back to Representative Sexton. Did you get everything you needed out of that answer? This was your question originally.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, Chair. My recommendation is we just delete it because I don't think it's congruent with everything else that we're stating in the job description. It comes across to me as a coach, and what we're here with the Inspector General is to go in, inspect, report, and we allow leaders to take further action. To me, the supervisor should be doing that particular statement that's in there for whoever is being inspected. So again, I just recommend deleting it. It's not necessary.
Representative Nash, I believe you had your hand up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would support Representative Sexton's motion to strike that and would make it a formal motion. But I think by very virtue of the nature of this position that is going to be appointed, they are going to walk in with absolutely no emotion, I hope. They're going to walk in and they're going to look at something and say, this is malfeasance, or this is not working, this is broken. And I don't know that the person who I would ultimately want to hire, were I hiring in my private sector life, that I would encourage them to be brave or have courage. I would want them to go in and just say, this is not working, and we're going to get rid of it or fix it or prosecute the people who are doing something wrong. So I think, and Madam Chair, if you would indulge me, I would make a motion to strike that sentence.
Yeah, yes, let's go to Senator Coran.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I also second, I agree with the comment. It's a statement without action or purpose. And so it adds nothing. The work that we need to do to make sure to ensure we select the proper people who are going to do the functional tasks that we expect them to do. This does nothing. Who will, it's open. How do you know when something's not working? Who's going to determine that? And if that person hasn't figured it out, that's going to be our role, right? And from an oversight perspective on what is working and what isn't working, and to take the actions appropriate to correct it. And so I think we will have to pick the person who will operate at a high level through or multiple people for selection. It's a statement without any purpose or meaning. So I think we remove it.
Representative Cleburne?
Thank you. I don't personally care if the sentence stays in or is struck. It doesn't matter. But I think when you were talking about we step in with courage, expertise, and commitment, okay, in the job summary that's listed on this very page, it says, set statewide standards for fraud prevention. If you go to the next page, it says create and communicate a strategic vision. And then it says advocate for policies. To me, those words and those phrases are, when we see something's not working, we work to fix it. So I don't believe that it's completely incongruent, but I mean, whether it stays or goes, I think we want whoever applies for this position to be someone who is going to come in and engage with systems that we have and look for ways to improve the systems. I think we want somebody who's going to come in and do a de novo review, right? I think that's something that we want. If we're saying the status quo isn't working and we have this fraud, then yeah, we want someone who's going to say, if this isn't working, we step in with courage and expertise. But the sentence staying or going, I'm open to either position.
Senator Putnam.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Everyone else has talked, so I kind of feel like I have to. But for the record, I don't really care a whole lot about this specific sentence. I will say that whole section is primarily narrative in function. It's there to sort of create a theme or a feeling. It's not supposed to be substantial. You can tell by the subheading, which is the work you do is more than just a job. It actually is a job. So we could say that that's irrelevant too. I mean, again, I'll go back to my earlier point that I don't really care. But just for clarity's sake, in terms of the composition of the document, that whole paragraph is functionally irrelevant and is much more thematic in nature.
All right. All right, all those in favor of deleting the line starting with when something isn't working and ending with at their source, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed say nay. It's removed, sorry. All right. Any other discussions, questions, inquiries, curiosities? We may need just a minute. Okay. I leaned over to ask a side question and turned it into discussion, so we're just going to make it a discussion. We're wondering if we would like to talk about the parameters. We talked about a subpanel that would be part of that hiring process and what those parameters would look like. First of all, we should talk about how people feel about a subpanel, one from each caucus, one from each chamber, if everyone's okay with that, and then talk about what some of those parameters might look like. as far as just guidance as they're in those rooms for those initial screening processes. So first of all, how are we all feeling about a sub-panel? One from each caucus, one from each chamber. Does that feel efficient enough for the early process? I do think 8 members in screening is a little bit, especially, it's a lot, and especially for the timetable we're on. So I think for this part of it, I think a lean, mean machine that is just working with nonpartisan is efficient. Senator Crewin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not sure if 8 is too many, but I think the more important aspect is you want to encourage people to move on in the process. And hopefully we have a pool of candidates that are very professional, high-level candidates that have existing employment, and to encourage them to move forward in the process. I think having that second round not be in public and waiting for the public hearing on the third round is probably important. And if that means we have to have the sub-panel, then that's the direction we ought to go, it seems to me. I think the threshold question that I have is that we should probably discuss is, do we want to have a process, or what is the process for coming up with that sub-panel? And then we can maybe talk about what the bigger body wants to do in terms of parameters.
Representative Cleaborn.
Thank you. I think it's, I think an easy way for us to do this is for this committee to take a small recess, just a couple minutes. And so the House DFL members meet, the House Republican members meet, our Senate Republicans, Senate Democrats meet separately. So we're not meeting as a committee of the whole, right? It would be 2, 2, 2, 2, and 2. There is a private room where we can go and have a quick discussion, and we determine ourselves which one of us would be on the committee, the subcommittee. I don't think it's that hard. It's just.
Madam Chair.
Senator Cran.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And so, yeah, on the Legislative Audit Commission, and on the schedule, it shows by September 15th. And so what we've traditionally done is the chair and the vice chair, right, facilitate, look for, we can decide on, today, I think we'd like one person from each caucus. I think that makes sense in the process. And then between the chair and vice chair, solicit who wants to volunteer first, depending on the schedule. That's how we've worked it out. And we haven't had a problem or had a formal deliberative debate publicly. But I do think the piece that's relevant for us to decide today, yeah, I think we'd like to just continue to move forward in the bipartisan nature in which we do that in the LAC as well. So one person from each caucus, we can, and you just need to turn it, we don't need to take formal action. It's a matter of getting them identified, documenting them, providing them LCC. And so when that process or their involvement then steps forward, that team will be prepared. So I recommend we just agree, yes, we'd like to have one person from each caucus. The chair and the vice chair can solicit volunteers from each of the caucuses. We'll collect that list and we'll be done.
I think that sounds awesome.
Okay, so just to be clear, we are moving forward with the subpanel of 4 members, bipartisan, bicameral. And the vice chair and chair can come up with or solicit 4 volunteers. They need to come from this commission, though. Mm-hmm. So do we want to take a break to find out people who are interested, or are there anybody who would like to express their interest now? We could take a short recess just to determine if people are interested of who would like to be part of that. Let's just do that. All right, we're going to take a brief recess, 2 minutes. Thank you. We'll be right back. All right, we are back. The Senate would like to put forward names for the subpanel, Senator Eric Putnam and Senator Michael Cruen. House, Vice Chair Nash.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I believe the House is going to be forwarding Representative Matt Norris and Representative Tom Sexton.
Right. So the subpanel is in place. Now would be a good time to talk about some of the concerns or questions or debates or discussions about parameters that you would like the subpanel to know going forward as they start that screening process. Sorry, Senator Cruen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think that for discussion purposes, what I'm most interested in is whether this body as a whole wants to set some parameters to the sub group. What are we calling that now? The subcommittee?
The LIGAC subpanel? I don't know.
Subpanel, all right.
We'll work on it.
I think we want to think about what is, and this can all be flexible, and I'm assuming can change through the course of the process if we want to meet again. But what is the end product that this body wants to move forward in terms of recommendations to the governor? Do we want to send one name, two names, three names? What does that look like from our preference? Because then we would need to work backwards in terms of the second round interviews and how many candidates ideally we would like to advance to a third round public interview. And so I'm interested in other members' perspective on that issue.
Senator Cruen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I think Senator Cruen brings up a great question. I think today, if in a perfect world, I think we need to set the expectation. We would love to find 3 extraordinarily qualified people that complete the entire process and that we could forward to the governor. And I think that will help from the LCC perspective that the pool, right, you'll get notice and you'll start to see in all your preliminary of those qualified. But if we set that, then everybody can set the expectations. We haven't met it in the 4-week window. Maybe we got to go 6 weeks to try to find as many qualified so we get to that, the 3. If at the end of the day, we wash out to where we have the 2 highest qualified people where we look and see their head and shoulders, I think we'd be comfortable that as a commission that we would say, we're good with these 2 options. But I think we should shoot high and shoot for 3 highly qualified that we believe will meet our expectations at the end of the day to be able to present to the governor for selection, and that all of us will be extraordinarily comfortable with any of those selections. We can modify it if the pool doesn't, if something needs to change or modify, there's no limits on when we meet to be able to address those types of things that'll evolve through this process.
Thank you. I would also say we should probably be careful of having a number in our head. We don't know what how many candidates are going to come forward, what their qualifications and experience are going to be. So if there are 12 people and they're all fantastic, then 12 it is. But I just don't want us to have a certain number. They're all going to have to come back before the full commission anyway. And at that point, we'll be able to ask our questions and debate and take a look at what has been screened. But I think I'm excited to see who steps forward, and I think I have faith that our subpanel will be able to make those determinations on their experiences. Anybody else, members? Senator Cruen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I want a flexible process, and I don't want a hard number that we're bound by for sure. But just thinking through it, I think would be helpful to the subpanel in doing the subpanel's work in advancing names to the final interview, the final public interview, so that we don't get to a position where we're advancing 2 names to the final interview and then the people that are on the subpanel are like, well, this is it, I want to send 2 names to the governor and I don't feel like I've been a part of the process. And so, if there's kind of a guiding light of ideally at least 3 we would send to the governor, then the subpanel can take that number, work backwards, and use their best judgment on how many candidates to send to that final interview.
If I could ask a question to Stephanie James, I know that this was a very thorough and thought-out process when we were talking about the list and what we can present to the governor. Just constitutionally, we cannot tell the governor what name to pick, and this is why we provide a list. Is there a limit on the number? So if the commission submits 2 names or 10 names or whatever, it doesn't matter? Okay. Sorry.
Madam Chair and members, yes, that's right. There would be no limit or constraints on the number that you could recommend.
Okay. Yeah, Representative Cleburne.
I just would like to ask a clarifying question. Senator Kroon, at first I thought you were saying one thing, and then when I heard you clarify, I heard something different. So this is really just clarification for me. So are you suggesting that at least 3 names come forward, so that, or at least 5 names come forward for the entire panel to discuss? It can't be that it's limited, but if we have less than 3, then the subcommittee needs to sound the alarm that we need to look at the posting.
Senator Kroon.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Representative Cleburne. Yeah, I mean, I'm, as a sub-panelist, I would want to understand what the expectation is from the body as a whole before we go into those interviews. If the expectation, fully acknowledging that it's flexible, but if the expectation is ideally we'd like to send 3 names to the governor, well then, that I would be cognizant of that, not sending 2 names to the whole panel and then it getting here and well, we're only left with 2, and so I would be cognizant of sending more than 3 names at that point to that final, if that is what this body wants to do. And that's why I thought we start with, ideally, roughly speaking, what does it look like? How many names we want to send to the governor? And then we work backwards from there for the work of the sub-panel.
Madam Chair.
Oh, you have Senator Kroon, or Coran, sorry.
Yeah, Madam Chair, and Representative Cleburne, I think what we're setting is a goal, right? We're never going to change our standards or expectations, but the alarm will be first by the LCC. Our pool is either large enough that we think we can get there, right? We don't know. We'd be lucky to have an opportunity that we at the end of the day, the final product, that we had 3 extraordinarily qualified people that we'll just go and say, any one of these 3 we're happy with. But that entire process of their recruitment, where do they recruit from, the pool that come forward, their down select, all the work that they're going to do to be even qualified to present those to the subcommittee, and then hopefully in the subcommittee it's pruned down to, hell, it'd be great to have 10 highly qualified people to the subcommittee. Then we got to decide from that who are the most qualified, and put us in a position that 1, the governor's going to pick them, but 2, that they're the most qualified. We're not limited. But I think if we set a goal, if we set a goal of 1, it's going to shrink the pool that they have to recruit from, and we get 1 highly qualified. I want us to have an arduous decision making that we have extraordinarily qualified, and they're going to sound the alarm that we're either meeting or we're not, and we're going to have to look and say, is it a pay? What are those things that we don't think are being met to attract the highest qualified just from the initial applicants? And we won't know who all come through the background checks or any of those things. But I think if we set a goal that we would love, I think 3 we would have an extraordinary pool, number of people to get 3 extraordinarily highly qualified that we would all be comfortable with sending to the governor. So I think we're just saying, here's some basic parameters, nothing set in stone, but that will give them the guideline that says, hey, we've got a red flag, we're not getting a pool, we got to extend the time frame, whatever that is, to give us, that subcommittee, enough people to highly qualified to down select from.
Vice Chair Nash.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I've gone through something similar to this as a trustee of a college, and when it was time to pick a new president, the parameters that were given to the search committee were, we did say we wanted a set number of people to come from the search committee up to the full body of trustees to say we want, I believe we said we wanted at least 3 to come before, because once you got to that point, each person would spend one-on-one time interviewing the potential new president, questions were asked, and then we came as a body of the whole, and other questions were asked, and they would make a presentation to us. So I think, to Senator Cruin's point, having an expectation, I don't know that we need to have it written into some document, but we are all here, 8 of us, to figure out who this next person is going to be. And I think that we can make an agreement amongst us to say, in the interest of a great work product, we want at least 3 people coming up from the sub-panel. Knowing that each of us has a different thing that we may be looking for. Quite honestly, there was a person that I thought would have made a great president at the college I was a trustee at. They had a horrible interview, and they got removed. All the things that we've ever gone through as business owners or managers or whoever it is you're hiring someone, those come to play, and it's with that in mind that I think having something that's sort of a tacit agreement amongst us that there will be at least 3 would be a really wise move, so that we have, once it gets to the committee of the whole, that we have the ability to not have to go back to the drawing board once we've gotten there.
I agree. Anyone else? Any other members? Okay, well, I think all this conversation is a really good way to highlight how seriously we're taking this. I think we're all feeling the weight of this commission and what we're doing. So I feel that we're off to a really good start. We do need to make a motion. Vice Chair Nash moves to adopt the proposed recruitment, screening, and recommendation process as presented during today's meeting. LCC staff are authorized to work with the Department of Administration to proceed with the posting of the Inspector General position and to implement the process. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Motion adopted. Okay, and with that, we are next to future meeting dates and topics. We're going to need to hold at least one hold on one second. The commission will need to hold at least one meeting to discuss a recommendation on merging the financial crimes and fraud section at DPS into the OIG. And so we'll need to decide on that, and then we'll have to at least need to meet the week of December 14th to interview finalists. So Representative Cleavorn.
Madam Chair, I just want to make sure that I'm clear. We just voted for them to have a process, to determine a process, but we didn't really address the question that was before the body for the subcommittee to have some direction. Are we in agreement? I think at least 3 for recommendations coming forward is a really good choice, but I want to make sure that we are clear on that.
Senator Cruin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Here's how I'm thinking about it, and you all can let me know if you're thinking about it the same way. Obviously, this is all flexible, so I don't think we need any formal motions or numbers, but the way I'm thinking about it as a sub-panelist is ideally, if the applicants are strong enough and we have the numbers, we would want to send at least 3 names to the governor, which tells me as a sub-panelist, ideally, in a perfect world, we send more than 3 names to the full body. So I would, I don't want to put a number on that, but something to give the full body meaningful input and to winnow that down to ideally 3. So something more than 3 would come for that final interview. That's how I'm thinking about it.
Representative Cleavorn.
No, that's great. I just want to make sure that, people define things with their own thoughts and their own understanding, and I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. So if the idea is that at least 3 to the governor, then I trust you to do the work that you need to do. Thank you.
Your form at the back of your packet. Fill it out, leave it with the chair. Oh, you didn't have one? No? Guess you donated your time.
All right, our final question is, as I talked about future meeting dates and topics, one on the financial crimes and fraud section at DPS going to OIG, and then, of course, as we go forward with the screening, but particularly in the financial crimes and fraud section at DPS, is there any information that would be helpful for the commission to have before we meet on that particular meeting? And if you think of something later, you are always feel free to email all of us about information that you might need on that meeting. Of course, an agenda will be introduced to you before the meeting is announced. But if there's anything you can think of now, please let us know. Otherwise, we're going to be polling for dates to find out when people are available. There'll be a hybrid option. Let us know. Yeah, Representative Cleaborn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think it would be really great for us to hear from the Office of the Legislative Auditor to see how they currently work with BCA. I think it would also be very good for us to hear from BCA. I know we had them testify in state government about clarity of rules, how they do things. I think it would be good for us to hear how they would see themselves interacting with an OIG, if that's the decision we're going to be making.
No, I agree with you. I think that would be great information to have as we move forward. Anyone else? All right. Okay, well, we will add that. Please check your emails for poll on dates available. We'll be putting that forward along with materials, resources, and the agenda as soon as a date is decided on. All right, there being no more business before the commission, the meeting is adjourned.